And before we get into more questions, I wanted to just give you an example. We talked about what homeopathy is and how it works. And there's one really practical example that doesn't even involve taking an oral homeopathic remedy, but it works really well. Do any of you have an idea of a home remedy just using water only to treat burns, like if you burn yourself in the kitchen? Okay. Now chefs, actually, a lot of chefs know this. Have you heard of this? No? So chefs in the kitchen, they're working, they don't have time to stop and move on. So a lot of them know that when they burn themselves, they'll run their finger that just got burned immediately under hot water for just a few seconds and then keep going. And so conventional wisdom has always been, we always learn, to put ice on it or, soak it in cold water. And have you guys ever done that? Like soaked a burn in ice cold water after you burned yourself?
I think that would be my instinct.
Yeah. Do you remember doing it?
I'm always crying or something.
Yeah. I remember doing ice. And then, do you remember after you soak your hand in the ice or put the ice on it, what happens when you remove the ice? It's throbbing. It hurts worse than it was when you burned it, right? Consistently. I mean, that's been my experience, and that's been everyone I've talked to. You soak it in ice, you take it out, and now, before it hurt, now it really hurts, and it's throbbing. So, what's happening is, there's this burn. You try to treat it allopathically by using cold. And what happens is, if you keep it in cold for too long, the body doesn't want your body part to get frostbite. So the effect of soaking a body part in cold water for too long will be that the blood will start to rush to the area and actually stagnate there. The circulation will slow down, and you'll get this stasis of blood, this accumulation of pooling of blood right in the area, which is not what you want. It's not conducive to healing. It's actually the opposite. It actually slows down healing, because any time in the body you want to encourage healing, what you want to do is increase circulation. Now, in the beginning of an injury, like a musculoskeletal injury, putting ice on an injury is appropriate for the first day or two. But then very shortly thereafter, you actually want to switch to a combination of heat and ice to get the circulation going. But for a burn, if you ever burn yourself, next time, try immediately putting your finger or the body part in water that's as hot as you can stand it without it being real uncomfortable. It should be a little uncomfortable. Just put your finger or the body part in water that's hot enough so that it's just slightly uncomfortable. And within about 10 seconds, it should not be uncomfortable anymore. And then you want to leave it in the water until the water no longer feels warm or cold. It just kind of gets to the same temperature as your skin or room temperature. It takes about 10 or 20 minutes. When you pull your finger out of that water, if you have the time, 9 times out of 10, it'll feel completely fine. And the white mark that you thought was starting to cut, sometimes it's just completely gone. It works tremendously well. Now, if it's a more severe burn where there's actually blister, skin has been seared off or something, that's a different story. But I'm talking about for like a first or even second degree burn, this is appropriate and works really well. So it's a great example of homeopathy. You were subject to this hot trauma, and then you just submerge the body part in more heat, and the body actually, in reacting to that hot, it will actually kind of direct the blood will start to move towards the area, away from the area. It'll start to trigger more of a increased circulation effect, and it seems to work really well. So it's homeopathy in practice without even taking oral medication. Okay?
That's great.
So try that next time. And let's see. So okay. So one person said they were interested in treating, using homeopathy to treat colds and flus and prevent them. So we do have, as I said, that information on the nutritional information and information on preventing colds and flus. there are a lot of remedies that you can use to do that. The main ones for flu are influenzinum or influenzinum and angostal, and then there's other ones if people. So I recommend if you tend to get a flu once in a while, it's not really very bad, and you want to do a little extra, then influenzinum is great.
You spell that?
It's like influenza,
Yeah.
and it's INUM, and that's in your handouts from last time.
Yeah, okay.
And this is all in your handout. So
And that's the preventive, or that's the
yeah,
treatment?
that's preventive. All of these work much better for prevention than treatment because they're not especially specific to your flu symptoms. They're more general. In homeopathy, it's much easier to prevent than to treat. You can be much more general and less specific with your remedy selection for prevention. As long as you get close, oftentimes prevention works fairly well. If you're actually sick, you're going to do a much better job by using something more specific. If you do get sick, you can try using these remedies, and they'll help to some degree, but they're not going to be as, you won't see as dramatic effect. So influenzinum is great. Oscillococcinum is another one that's really good for colds and flus. Angostal as well, and then mucococcinum and bacillinum are also good for that. So I would say the more often you get sick, the more severe it is, the more of those remedies you should cycle through as prevention. And again, that's explained in the handout, so I don't want to go into the details, but just talking in general. Now, specifically, the best way to get prevention from any disease, whether it's cold or flu or any other infectious disease, is to be treated with what we sometimes refer to as constitutional treatment, where you actually see a professional homeopath. We take that 2 to 3 hour case, we prescribe the one specific remedy that you need to treat whatever kind of chronic symptoms you have. Even if you don't have a chronic disease, or you're generally fairly healthy, there should, for most people have some signs of symptoms that we can actually prescribe off of. So you may not consider it problematic, but you might have, for example, you might be craving a particular food. And when we prescribe the right remedy that you need, you may find that those cravings lessen. So it's not really a disease, but if we do that for you, and the remedy works, and your cravings decrease, and your energy picks up a little bit, and your sleep improves, you have deeper sleep, maybe your allergies go away, or you tend to get less, you'll start to notice that you're tending to get less colds and flus, you're just overall healthier. So that's the best way to prevent really any disease, any infectious disease, or even developing future health problems, is just to do that. Otherwise, you can be more specific, and if you're traveling to a certain country where a third world country where there's malaria or something like that, we can be more specific and give you remedies specifically to help prevent malaria, for example. But again, the best way for prevention is to actually get the chronic constitutional remedy that your body will respond to on a chronic or long-term basis. Treatment for Parkinson's disease was brought up, and homeopathy can be very effective in treating patients with Parkinson's disease and other neurologic diseases. Again, we were kind of talking about before class, the sooner you can treat someone for it before there's more permanent or relatively permanent deficits, the better the result's going to be. In diseases like MS and Parkinson's and things like that, oftentimes we can, at the point at which we start to see the patient, we can oftentimes, or even typically I would say, keep the patient in that state, keep them from getting much progression or dramatically slowing down the progression. There's other diseases that are a little more aggressive and that we have less of an effect on. So it really depends, in some cases, condition to condition. But once there's long-term or what we would consider permanent or semi-permanent damage to tissue, the degree to which that can be reversed is pretty limited with homeopathy. So the moral of the story is basically the earlier the better. So then there's another question that's a little more specific. Can all illnesses, acute and chronic, be addressed homeopathically? So I would say that, again, we're not treating any illnesses with homeopathy. We're treating patients that might have illnesses. So, for example, HIV is not an infectious disease that's curable with homeopathy as far as we know. There might be some claims out there, but that's not my experience. I don't know that they've been substantially verified. However,
I did look at a study today, and I'm writing an article about this. I write about health, and there was a study done in '98 and a follow-up in '99 in India, but it was in a situation where they weren't getting conventional medicine, allopathic treatments due to economics, and they tracked, I think, like 62 patients, and kept them in a stable condition, kind of like you described. It was over, I think, a 2-year period.
So I would expect that, again, it's not. We're not talking about seroconversion and a cure, but a patient with HIV who's treated with homeopathy, just constitutionally, even just giving them that chronic remedy that they need, that's going to help their immune system significantly.
Right.
So they should be
no
much
mention of
healthier.
cure, of course. It was about weight gain.
And the other thing is, then every time they get an opportunistic or infectious disease as a result of, or not as a result of, the underlying HIV, every time they're treated homeopathically for one of those infectious diseases and successfully treated homeopathically, their immune system becomes stronger and they become less susceptible to those infectious diseases in the future. Just like, same thing with anyone who is HIV negative. It works the same way. So there is a huge benefit in using homeopathy, and there's no reason that a patient can't be on protease inhibitors or conventional HIV medication and homeopathy at the same time. So the limitations are there's not very many infectious disease exceptions. Almost every infectious disease can be treated successfully with homeopathy, but there's always exceptions. Advanced stage cancer can be treated, it's just much more difficult. The results just statistically are not as good, and the rapidly progressing neurologic diseases are very challenging to treat. And again, the earlier the better, and we don't always see 100% cure, but we can see a lot of improvement in quality of life. Even in someone who's dying, the death can be more peaceful and painless and drug-free and natural. So there's even an indication, basically if the patient's breathing, then homeopathy is appropriate for them. And it can be used in conjunction with conventional medicine, as I think we've talked about. The remedies do not interact with drugs negatively in any way. The drugs that you may be on may interfere with your body's ability to heal. So to that degree, they can interfere with the remedy's ability to sort of trigger that healing reaction or maintain the healing reaction. The healing reaction can be suppressed by the suppressive medications. But it's not like there's a drug interaction where the remedy is going to make the drug not work, or the drug is going to make the remedy not work. It doesn't work that way. Now, there's certain vitamins and herbs that will actually interfere with conventional medications' action. So it's very different, and that's when you'll hear people talking about this, sometimes they confuse vitamins and herbs with homeopathy, and that's where you have to be careful with, and that's why I devote the whole first page of that What is Homeopathy paper to what homeopathy is not. And it's not vitamins, it's not herbs, even though these are all natural things.